that Harvard can't fix its problems and shouldn't be allowed to fix its problems. Chris Rufo is back now. Hi, Chris. I've summarized Lawrence Summers and other thing. What's your take on the Harvard situation?
Well, it's a very simple question. The question that no one on the left seems to want to answer is what is the relationship between the government and universities that accept, in Harvard's case, billions of dollars of public funds? And the Trump administration has very wisely said if you want to continue to collect taxpayer largesse, you have to follow the letter of federal law, including the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Harvard has a history of flagrant, open, and repeated racial discrimination, racial segregation, racial scapegoating. We've seen this, over the years, and the Harvard administrators seem to believe that as long as their discrimination is against whites, Asians, and Jews, they don't need to worry about it. The Trump administration is saying you have to comply with federal civil rights law in order to receive federal funds. I think this is a smart policy, and I think that Harvard, if it's smart, should come to the negotiating table and to correct the discriminatory policies that are currently in place.
The acting president of Harvard quickly dismissed, less than 96 hours after a 6-page, very carefully worded letter arrives from the Department of Education and other agencies telling we got to work on governance and leadership reform, merit-based hiring, merit-based admissions, international admissions, viewpoint diversity in admissions and hiring, reforming programs with egregious records of anti-Semitism or other bias, discontinuation of DEI, student discipline reform, whistleblower reporting and protection, transparency. 5-page letter. It's very specific, and they say, go away. They don't give a substantive response. I believe that, like, de facto admission on their part that they can't fix the university. How do you judge their response to that letter?
Well, look, Ivy League university presidents are actually in a difficult situation. They know deep down that racial discrimination is wrong, that the universities have gone haywire, that many of their departments have been captured by ideology, but they don't have the internal strength to actually implement reforms. So they try to maintain this status quo where they just keep dancing into the future without actually addressing these problems. That's probably what's at play here with the president of Harvard, also the president of Princeton. But that really just strengthens the Trump administration's position because they can say, you have to comply or you are no longer eligible for these funds or you're no longer eligible to have tax exempt status. The law is on the side of the Trump administration. The money is on the side of the Trump administration. It's really hard to see how Harvard can maintain the status quo. And so I think that the administration should really lay into this and actually make good on some of these threats and show that, look, civil rights law is now not not an optional thing. You actually have to comply with the law. That's a very strong position. And I saw a headline today that Harvard researchers were considering euthanizing research animals if they don't get the federal money. So in essence, they're holding these animals hostage,
Ha! I
and they're
didn't know
willing
that.
to euthanize innocent animals because they don't want to give up being able to violate civil rights law. I think that tells you everything that you need to know about the priorities of these institutions.
Now, Chris, in your book, America's Cultural Revolution, you trace how critical theory, it actually begins at Harvard Law School, and it spreads everywhere throughout the university through Marcuse and others, as you illustrate. It is no small irony that its collapse, and with it DEI's collapse, is coming home on the head of Harvard. I'm glad that they went in high. They didn't go for a small target. They went for Columbia and Harvard to start with. And I praise them for that because they have the means to defend themselves with. The federal government can't roll them. And that's why I'm not worried about injustice here. Are you worried about injustice here?
Well, I'm worried about injustice in the sense that if the administration doesn't get Harvard to comply with its basic responsibilities, because what's happening at Harvard right now is an injustice. The status quo at the Ivy League universities is a form of injustice. And so the president and his department heads should use aggressive tactics to try to remedy these wrongs. And so the Harvard point in particular is a poetic return because Harvard manufactured the ideology of critical race theory. It exported this ideology to America's institutions. But now the flaws in this ideology are starting to actually, flower into being. You have Harvard's former president, Claudine Gay, who really rose on the ideologies of critical race theory and DEI. She's no longer there because she was a serial plagiarist and much of her academic work was compromised by academic fraud. And now you have the institution as a whole being put in the spotlight. And what Americans are starting to see is discrimination, stereotyping, segregating, not enforcing the basic rules of conduct that are required in universities. And so I don't have any, sympathy for those administrators who want to continue down this path. They really need to stop, and I think that that's what's coming.
I have one more question for you, Chris. I'll ask it during the break, and then I'll play it for folks later down the road. Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back. I'm back with Christopher Rufo with one question. Chris, if you were going to actually try and reform Harvard, and you were having a conversation off the record with Garber, their acting president, what would you tell him to do?
Well, look, I've had a conversation with a number of people at Harvard, behind the scenes, off the record, and what I told them is exactly what I would tell the interim president, Alan Garber. I would say you have to figure out how to adjust your administrative policies so that they comply with the principle of colorblind equality. You don't discriminate in admissions, in hiring, in other decisions of university administration. You have to abolish the DEI program, which is really designed to violate civil rights law. And then beyond that, you have to start to rebalance the faculty and to reorient the academic enterprise towards truth and away from ideology. That's a long-term goal. That's going to take significant investment, and it'll take some time. But look, Harvard has done it before. When the faculty became unbalanced, when the faculty was not pursuing knowledge and truth with high standards, they made changes. And I'm confident that that could happen again in the future because, Harvard built a reputation over almost 400 years. They've torched that reputation in the past 5 years. It's cost them money. It's cost them prestige. It's cost them now potentially billions of dollars in federal funds. At some point, the pain is going to be so enormous that they have to reform. I hope they do so sooner rather than later.
I agree with you on that. Christopher Rufo, thank you for joining me today. His book, which is the primer you all need, is called America's Cultural Revolution. How did we get here? Chris has laid it out for you in America's Cultural Revolution. Thank you, Christopher Rufo.
Thank you.